Welcome to Modem Futura, the podcast where we explore the intersection of technology, society, and what it means to be human in an increasingly complex world. You're with me, Sean Leahy, and I'm joined with Andrew Maynard.
Hi, great to be here, Sean.
Yeah, this is fantastic. So we're just jumping in with our pilot edition here of Modem Futura.
Looking forward to this.
Let's get going.
Initializing waveform.
Modulating signals for transmission.
Exploring the possible, probable, and preferable futures.
Welcome to Modem Futura. Yeah, should I explain what Modem Futura even is?
You probably should.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, kind of going back to the genesis of this podcast, I think in general, this podcast is something I've been wanting to do for probably 7 years. I think finding a name for this podcast is one of the most difficult.
I remember the discussions we had.
We
went the failed attempts.
Half of everything we wanted was, or maybe more than half, was taken already. Yep. So there's a challenge in a flooded market of finding something unique, but also that's meaningful in a deeper way. But
also sort of in this space around sort of the future tech society and everything that encompasses.
Yeah. And so many of those terms have already been so overused and tortured,
right,
in so many ways, right? But yeah, so we sort of landed on Modem Futura, which I really liked because it really plays on the word modem for both what it is, which if people don't know, right, is basically it's a amalgamation of modulation and demodulation going back to the old. I mean, we still use these all the time.
I was going to say how far back does that go? That must be the sort of 70s, pre-70s even possibly.
Yeah, well, especially, and most people, I think when you think of a modem, I mean, you have these in your home. You have a cable modem or a fiber modem.
Actually, I forgot that we still call them modems.
They're still modems.
I think about the dial-up modem.
Most people do.
Yes.
And that's, which in the intro of this podcast, you hear the talk,
Yep.
the squawk,
Yep.
Which is the handshake, which is a cool bit that there's actually, when you look at the spectrum breakdown of that handshake, you can identify what is exactly happening, the exchange between them.
Right.
But essentially, I thought it fit really well with a podcast about futures because the modem, in a sense, does what we do, which is take all kinds of different signals, things that are happening, innovations, disruptions, and translate them into something different, a different signal that is easier to understand over a new medium. That actually
makes sense.
That actually makes sense.
It takes that sort of warbly type of stuff and translates it into something that you can actually understand and enjoy listening to.
That's right. That's the idea. And Futura, of course, is just a Latin version of future. So it sounded cool.
Yeah,
and
not that we decode the future, but we're
That's right.
decoding perspectives and insights and thoughts and weird stuff around the future.
That's it, right? And then I think what we, in our trailer, we had specifically said, as futurists do, right? We do not predict the future. We talk about the uncertainties and think about how we can be best prepared to handle those uncertainties in the future. But really thinking about the possible, probable, and preferred futures and across the board.
Yep.
I think that's a really fun element of that I'm really excited about with this podcast as well, is just the sheer diversity of topics that are at our disposal.
Yeah. So this really excites me. More than that, though, I think it's really important. So, I talk a lot in my work and to my students and to anybody that will listen to me about how this is such a unique time in human history. I can't get my head around just how profoundly unique it is. And it's because things are changing so fast with the technologies we're developing, with the power they come with. But not only that, they're going into social systems that are changing rapidly as well in a world that's changing. And the academic in me thinks, wow, this is fantastic. And then the human in me thinks, just a minute, maybe there are things here that we don't want to be doing, but it makes it really interesting and really important to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Andrew, I wonder if you can just spend a couple minutes too about talking about the origins of starting the Future of Being Human initiative.
Of course, yes, because this is the podcast is obviously tied with this.
Yep.
And this goes back 2 or 3 years now. And the genesis of it was me realizing that the one thing we seem to be lacking and finding hard to get the space for is having discussions about the future and how it's changing the world, and what is good and what is bad, and more specifically, how it's changing us. So I wanted to create a space where people from all walks of life can be part of those conversations. They can have the thrill of thinking about the future. They can have the ability to sort of tease apart what they really don't want to see and what they do want to see, but we've got to have that space for conversation. But then I was thinking about this, and there are big conversations that go on about the future of society and futures more generally, but those are very impersonal. And it got me thinking that the thing that really matters to everybody is, what does it mean to me? What will it actually mean to be me in the future, to be a human? And how will these technologies actually change possibly what it means to be human, or maybe they won't. But that to me was the catalyst for some really interesting and really important conversations. So we started off with this tagline of what will it mean to be human in 100 years' time?
Yeah.
And what does that mean about being human now and the decisions we make?
Yeah. And I think that, obviously I'm a believer in that. I've had the great fortune of being able to join you at the Future of Being Human initiative. But I mean, similar, I think I come from it from a similar point. And so one thing that was amazing, just discovering the Future of Being Human initiative and the work that you've been doing here, was like finding my tribe in that way, right?
Yes.
Where it's so the same kind of sort of questions have been swirling with, a lot of my work sort of living in these fraction of bubbles, right? So inside of academia, but in media production and also in like the futures space, but becoming, in some ways increasingly frustrated with the lack of access or ease of approaching these kind of subjects or topics and being able to talk about them around dinner tables, at the pubs,
that is exactly it. So there are 2 or 3 things that really sort of got my juices flowing here. But one of them was, so often these conversations are exclusive. So I meet people of every type that are excited about the future, that have insights that I find profound and exciting and interesting, whether they are middle school or high school students, whether they're people that have never gotten education, whether they are sort of professors at top universities, whether they are my neurodivergent students who have really profound things to say and think about, but they can't find anybody to talk to them about. So I began to realize that everybody has got something interesting and important to say about the future, and we needed those opportunities for them to be part of those conversations where they're at. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think, one of the things that was I would say an early inspiration to me, because I do want to also ask, just in general, where, from a career perspective, like where your interest specifically in like futures, came from. But for me, I remember having a very specific sort of a catalyst around these things when I first became aware of, so many different terms: futurology, futurism, right? All these terms, and being, always sort of with an eye towards emerging technologies and really pushing, but then was sort of drawn in, but also with this idea of always keeping this humanistic element at present, right? Knowing that there are, sort of intrinsically, I've always had a sensitivity to the unintended consequences of these things. And I think one of the things that really sort of drew my attention, especially back when sort of the language around the Fourth Industrial Revolution was really
coming
kicked
from
off.
the World Economic Forum,
Klaus Schwab, and all these ideas. But one of the things that I think resonated so deeply and strongly with me was the level of importance placed on protecting vulnerable populations, which include our environment as well. They lump that in there as well. But really thinking like, how do we navigate these innovations, disruptions, convergences of digital, biological, physical technologies in a way that promotes the human flourishing while not continuing, exacerbating, or otherwise just preserving these inequities that exist right now.
And that, it's such an important thing to me. But as you said, it took a whole career to get there.
Yeah.
So I actually came from a background when I was a young kid where just naturally, we were encouraged to think about sort of the bigger, broader things in this world, sort of human kindness, human dignity, the environment around us. But I grew up as a physicist, and I actually studied physics because I was really bad at everything else. I'm sorry to say. It was the only thing that I could do. So I followed this track. But one of the things that I found with physics, especially how I was taught, was it taught you how to think creatively. And it taught you how to really capture the wonder in what you don't know. So just as an example of that, one of the things that has really stuck with me from my early days as an undergraduate studying physics was ideas around quantum physics, especially ideas coming out of Richard Feynman, where, and I'm sort of paraphrasing this story, but basically the story goes that if you have a volume of space where physics says it's impossible to know what's happening in that volume of space, you can make anything up. You could say there are little pixies in there playing with elephants. And as long as your theory predicts what comes out of that space, it's a good theory. But that idea that you can be wildly creative has stuck with me through my whole career. And I owe so much to that physics training. But as my sort of career went on, I began to realize that actually there's a bigger world out there than just physics. I got involved with emerging technologies, nanotechnology in particular, with really sort of leading conversations around how to develop this responsibly. And there was a pivot point there. So at that point, I was still a scientist, but working with policymakers. But then I got a position where I had to work with journalists, with other policymakers, giving testimony up on Capitol Hill, working with NGOs, and that was transformative, working with members of the public. And I was actually scared out of my wits for 2 years doing this. Nobody trained you for this.
Right.
But it made me realize that the only way we can build the sort of future we want, especially in the light of emerging technologies, is to make sure everybody who is potentially impacted by that has a seat at the table and a voice. And if they're going to have a voice, they need to understand what's going on in relation to what their aspirations are. So you've got to have that ability to translate what is happening, even in complex science, to everyday people so that they can be part of the decision-making process. That, to me, I think, was the switch point that both got me really interested in futures more generally, but also the supreme importance of making sure everybody has the ability to be part of building those futures.
Yeah, I mean, I can't agree more with that, because I think that's one of the major challenges is, we have these conversations, and as you mentioned, everyone you talk to has an opinion, or they have their own imagination, or they're exposed to the same science fiction and things that we are.
And they have a future in front of them.
They have a future, and that conversation is so vital, because again, and that's why one of the reasons we're doing Modem Futura, is exactly that, to hopefully bring these conversations and inspire people to continue with what we talk about, and go on. I mean, the sense of wonder that you mentioned, I think is something that I share as well. I don't know if I've told you this before, but did you know when I started my undergrad, I was a physics major? Actually,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was a physics major.
See, it's physics all the way down, you realize.
Well, and I found that I took a long detour. So started with physics, ended up in, IT and telecommunications, and went that route. But later in life have kind of come full circle to like the whole, natural physics, metaphysics, just understanding and really enjoying the connectedness of everything, and the associated wonder of where our knowledge of things stop and what is going on inside those. So raising lots of really fun, mind-bending questions that challenge our philosophy of understanding what is consciousness? How do we know? Is this all a simulation? These kind of wonderful mind-bending sort of topics.
And I think sometimes we miss this. We get so fixated on the potential dangers that we face and the worries that we have, that we forget that if we go back to that idea of what it means to be human, part of being human is that ability to be awed by what we understand and what we see, and to just be overcome by wonder. And I think you can have both the awe and the wonder and the serious consideration of how we avoid bad things happening.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I don't know how true this anecdote is, but I think of, so strangely, when I was studying physics, I had to do one of these early reports on choose a physicist, and I chose Ernest Rutherford.
Okay. I just have to say, I was working in the Rutherford labs.
Oh my God, that's so cool. And one of the things so this anecdote, which I don't know is true, but I like it. So I will spread this false information if it turns out to be that, because the story that I think that what it gets at is that sense of wonder, which is so fascinating, which was, or at least the rumor goes, I'll use that, that through his work discovering like the atoms and particularly how empty they are, was this tale that the next morning he woke up and was sort of questioning or worried, like, if what's to stop me from falling right through the floorboards?
Right.
Because when you realize, like, the everyday physical response you get is, of course, you're not going to fall through the floorboard. It's solid and you can hit it, and everything around us tells you that is solid and it will bear your weight. But understanding from the molecular level that those molecules and then the atoms within those, it's mostly empty space.
Right. Yes.
So why do we not fall pass right through these objects?
Which is a perfect physics question. And of course, we know more about that these days, but still, and this is what fascinates me, we've got all of these sort of ideas about how physics works, including sort of talking about sort of the forces that actually hold everything together, which is why you don't fall through. Yep. But then somebody comes along and says, I don't believe that. And then you're back to ground zero again.
Yeah, it's tremendously sort of fascinating with that. But I think, and I think if I were to, using this opportunity to speak to our audience, right, it would say also like what we're hoping that you get out of our podcast is also, again, is a place to explore these ideas with us. Because again, one of the things I think we talked about it earlier, but it's worth re-mentioning. I'm excited about the breadth of that we get to talk about here. So I don't think there's anything off limits. And one of the things, I think we'll be talking about that I would like to talk about soon too, is sort of bridging. How do we approach these conversations that are becoming much more prevalent in popular media? I mean, obviously AI stuff is everywhere. That's going to be a consistent theme throughout. But even thinking about a lot of this idea of, as people think and work with futures, how are we defining the differences between human flourishing and movements that may have been co-opted or created, such as like the TESCREAL, long-termism, things that, can start off with a really clear understanding and altruistic understanding, but then once you get into them, can start to raise some very significant concerns.
No, I think you're right, but this, I think, is also something that's really important. We're living in an increasingly polarized world, but we can't make progress unless we're starting to talk to each other. Yeah. And somehow we need to create those spaces where we can have what are sometimes difficult conversations, where people have very different perspectives, but we can find the common ground and the common way forward. And so that's one of the things we do through Future Being Human. And hopefully it's something that we can catalyze here. We're not about telling the world what is right or what is wrong. Well, maybe sometimes we will, but we'll try not to.
We have opinions too, Andrew. We can share those.
but you used this word earlier. We act as a catalyst to light a fire in people's minds and imagination, so ideas flow and we can begin to actually explore together really interesting different ways of thinking about the future and society and how we actually find common ground to build the sort of futures we want.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm absolutely thrilled. I'm really looking forward to this first year of our podcast, and also leveraging our combined professional and personal networks of experts and colleagues that we have around the globe. And I'm hoping too, as our podcast sort of matures and we get feedback and we hear from people, of also expanding that reach. Like, who should we be talking to?
I'm really looking forward to that. Because, of course, there are some big names out there, but actually some of the most interesting thinkers are the people that nobody's heard of before. Yeah, and absolutely. I would love to wheedle those out and have them in front of the microphone. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm absolutely excited for this, and can't wait to get going. We just need an audience now. So that's where you come in. If you're hearing this, you are an audience. So please help us by doing all the things, subscribing, sharing, and hopefully you'll join us on this wonderful journey as we go through all that is the futures and all the wonderful topics that are out there for us to pick apart and explore. So as we look forward to this season, Andrew, I have to ask. So behind the scenes here, we've been trying to drum up and come up with just an exhaustive list of possible topics. Exhausting list, yes.
So yeah, what were you doing here?
Oh yeah, so this is my list of, I think it's 1,000+ ideas for conversations, and actually it was put together partially for my student classes where we talk about really weird, interesting stuff. But yeah, we've got this ever expanding list of weird things to talk about when it comes to the future,
and they are fantastic. For example, such future episode titles to include as "Dinosaurs didn't go extinct; they just got bored."
Did I write that?
Cyborg seahorses and silicon dreams. Mind melds and mood mods. The future of feeling. I like that one.
No, I like that one.
And this is a good one. I mean, this is a classic one, I think, in some ways. Ghosts in the machine, right?
Of course.
Focusing on AI afterlives.
AI afterlives. You can go so many different ways with that, and it gets really weird really fast.
Yeah. I'm particularly excited about things like the quantum consciousness, the new frontier of being. Mm-hmm. Yes. I like that.
Yeah, you should probably stop there because people are going to start thinking that we're a little bit sort of weird and alternative.
Hey, that's true.
We
this
are
is also
grounded,
true.
honest.
That's right. We're weird and interesting, but grounded in science and reason.
Yes.
I think. Awesome. Well, again, thank you, Andrew, for joining me today. And yeah, this is going to be a blast. Can't wait.
It absolutely is. No, looking forward to this.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we'll see you at the next episode of Modem Futura.
See you then.
Demodulating signal.
Modem Futura is a production of the Future of Being Human initiative at Arizona State University. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. To learn more about the Future of Being Human initiative and all of our other projects, please visit us on the web at futureofbeinghuman.asu.edu.
End transmission.